eminent clergy, the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament for Damango, the Deputy Minister of State for Lands and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament for Takwa and Siayem, members of Parliament Select Committee on Lands and Forestry, Metropolitan, Municipal and District Chief Executives, chairpersons, members, and chief executive officers of governing boards of the Ghana Integrated Aluminum Development Corporation and the Ghana Integrated Iron and Steel Development Corporation, board members and CEOs of the Lands, Forestry and Minerals Commissions, chairperson, directors and managing directors of the Board of Graphic Communications Group Limited, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Ubo Jasehine, Nananum, Nime, Name, fellow Ghanaians, ladies and gentlemen. I thank the Graphic Communications Group Limited and its managing director, Mr. Addo Afo, and their partners, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, for putting together this important dialogue. It is a timely intervention, and I applaud them for this initiative. When I called for a national dialogue on illegal small-scale mining in my address to Parliament on the 4th of January 2021, I did so out of the conviction that even though a lot had been achieved in this area between 2017 and 2021, illegal small-scale mining remained a challenge and continued to pose a threat to our very survival. A few months later, through the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, this dialogue was held and was followed by successive regional dialogues. Out of these dialogues emerged several measures which were adopted to help our nation come to grips with the menace of illegal small-scale mining. Undoubtedly, our situation would have been worse off if we had not adopted these measures, but we cannot rest while these illegalities still persist. Today, I open this natural resources stakeholder dialogue, not just to discuss illegal small-scale mining, but also the broader consequential issue of how we exploit, utilize, and manage the natural resources of our nation, and particularly, I should say, what has been described as the green minerals, the minerals of the future, in order to harness these resources for our sustainable collective good. Fellow Ghanaians, our everyday lives depend, one way or the other, on our natural resources. Today, most of the things we use, from electricity to smartphones and to the vehicles we derive, are derived from the exploitation of natural resources. The lives and livelihoods of millions of our citizenry depend on these natural resources. It is often said that, quote, without natural resources, life itself is impossible, unquote. As far back as 1952, when most parts of our continent were still under colonial rule, the United Nations, in its Declaration on Permanent Sovereignty over Natural Resources, encouraged underdeveloped nations to exploit and use their natural resources for economic development. The question, therefore, is not whether to exploit our natural resources or not, but how to exploit these resources sustainably for national development. This is a historical problem, not only in our country, but also across our continent. Undoubtedly, our continent is blessed with a lot of natural resources. After centuries of exploitation, Africa still holds some 30% of the world's mineral reserves, and even higher proportions of gold, diamond, bauxite, and manganese. But the contribution of these resources to our socio-economic development has been underwhelming, to say the least. With all these resources, we should have been the richest continent in the world. The sad irony, however, is that Africa remains the poorest continent on the planet. Recent data from the World Bank shows that some 60% of the world's extreme poor live in sub-Saharan Africa, with most resource-rich countries on our continent being amongst the poorest in the world, even though they are home to huge deposits of iron ore, diamonds, the largest rutile, manganese, and bauxite reserves in the world, the largest producers of cobalt, second largest producers of industrial diamonds, and fifth largest producers of copper. Worst of all, many of the areas where these resources are found appear to be amongst the most deprived areas in the world. In our country, for example, Obuasi, which for years hosted the richest gold mine in the world, remains largely underdeveloped. The story is no different from other areas such as Takwa, Prestea, Wassa, and Bibiani, which has for centuries been the attraction for adventurers and fortune seekers. The truth is that we have not always done well in negotiations with the companies that exploit our natural resources. Among other things such as corruption, incompetence, and political instability, we have been mostly short-sighted in these negotiations and thus end up settling for less. And worse still, we have until recently failed to put in place the requisite frameworks which will enable us to establish the highest ends of the value chains of the extractive industries in our continent. Extensive tax and royalty exemptions, intolerable labor practices, and lack of value addition in country have resulted in exceptional profits to mining companies at the expense of our communities, towns, cities, and countries. We cannot repeat these mistakes. While it is fully understood that mining companies must make profits from their businesses, it is important that this is not done at the expense of the lands and the peoples that provides these resources. Ladies and gentlemen, we must and should harness our natural resources for sustainable development. This requires us to ensure that the exploitation of these resources does not destroy the natural environment that provides us with substance. We must ensure that mining contracts address issues of environmental protection, the payment of adequate compensation to affected communities, and the development of the areas where these resources are derived. We must find a lasting solution to illicit financial flows associated with the natural resources sector. The Washington-based Global Financial Integrity think tank, for example, reports that out of some $1 trillion United States dollars in illicit financial flows from the continent between 1970 and 2008, the extractive industry was the major contributor, largely through corruption, illegal exploitation, and tax evasion. We cannot develop sustainably if this continues. We must tackle head-on the issues of illegalities in the extractive sector, including illegal mining and illegal logging, which have over the years been a source of destruction of our waters, our forests, water bodies, and arable lands, and which have deprived us of the resources needed for development. This is a collective responsibility. Government has its role, but government's efforts will come to naught if we all fail to do our part in this exercise. To quote the words of the celebrated American playwright, Ida LeChan, quote, "Until every individual feels personally responsible for the careful planning and the preservation of natural resources, the inexorable destruction will go on, unquote. I do not say these to shirk the responsibility of government, but to emphasize that the protection and preservation of our natural resources requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. The due exploitation of these resources has the potential to transform our country and indeed our continent. As some of you may know, for several years, the extractive sector has been the largest tax base of our country, apart from providing thousands of employment to several young men and women. The truth, however, is that over the years we have not benefited optimally from these resources due to our overdependence on the export of raw products. There's no gainsaying the fact that the real value of natural resources lies in their value addition. The value of the global aluminum industry, for example, from bauxite mining through alumina smelting and aluminum production, is estimated to be in excess of 180 billion United States dollars annually. But raw bauxite accounts for only 7.6% of this market, whilst the remaining 92.3% is generated from processed bauxite. This case is not different from those of gold, iron ore, manganese, diamond, cobalt, or lithium. Indeed, currently, African countries involved in the production of lithium are said to be making just about 10% of the entire value chain of the electric battery industry. This is why government has prioritized local content and local participation, as well as value addition in the natural resources sector, to ensure that we derive optimal benefits from these God-given resources. Let me acknowledge the Ghana Chamber of Mines, the Ghana Institute of Foresters, the Ghana Institution of Surveyors, and all other stakeholders for their cooperation in the implementation of these policies, and call on the Ghana Chamber of Mines to expedite work on the listing of their members on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Through the Ghana Integrated Aluminum Development Corporation, GIADEC, established in 2018, we're working to ensure value addition in our bauxite resources through refining, smelting, aluminum production, as well as production of other downstream aluminum products. I've been briefed that the 4-project agenda of GIADEC, which I launched in 2021, is progressing steadily, with projects 2, 3, and 4 approved by Cabinet and at different stages of implementation. Project 1 is still under negotiations and will come before Cabinet soon for its approval. The implementation of this 4-project agenda is expected to optimize production in the upstream industry and spur production and job creation in the downstream sector. With an estimated bauxite resource base of over 900 million metric tons, this sector can serve as an anchor for the country's industrialization if we continue to pursue value-added policies. We're doing the same with our iron ore resources through the Ghana Integrated Iron and Steel Development Corporation, GISDEC, initiated in 2019, with global automotive giants such as Toyota, Nissan, Volkswagen, Suzuki, and Sinotruk, all established here in our country. Developing an integrated iron and steel industry, along with an integrated aluminum industry, is not just desirable, but also necessary for the development we yearn. We cannot forget lithium and the other green minerals, which have been described as the minerals of the future due to their importance to the green energy transition. Fortunately for us, we've discovered lithium in commercial quantities and occurrences of cobalt, nickel, copper, lead, zinc, and chromium in the country. We should not do with these minerals what we have done with our gold resources over the years. I'm happy to learn that the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, under the dynamic leadership of its brilliant young minister, the Honorable Samuel Abu-Jinapor, Member of Parliament for Damango, is finalizing a policy document for the exploitation and utilization and management of these crucial minerals for the consideration of Cabinet in the next few weeks. I assure you that we'll do whatever it takes to ensure that the exploitation and utilization of these green minerals are done not only in an environmentally sound manner, but also in a way that ensures optimal benefit to the people of Ghana. This we will never compromise. Indeed, by Section 28 of the GIADEC law and Section 30 of the GISDEC law, the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources is empowered to make regulations to ensure that no bauxite or iron ore in their raw state is exported out of the country after 5 years of the coming into force of these laws. With the policies and measures we're putting in place, we intend to invoke these provisions of our laws, and soon bauxite and iron ore will no longer be exported in their raw state from the country. We will ensure that the highest values of these minerals is retained in our country. We have, through a public-private partnership, established a 400 kilogram per day capacity refinery to refine the gold we produce. Work is progressing steadily on securing a London Bullion Market Association, LBMA, certification to enable us trade easily our refined gold on the international market. Today, for the first time in our history, the Bank of Ghana is implementing a domestic gold purchase program, which was launched in June 2021 to purchase gold domestically to shore up our gold reserves. This has culminated in an agreement with the large-scale mining companies for the Bank of Ghana to purchase 20% of their gold output in cedis, again easing the pressure on the cedi. For well over the century that we have been mining gold, our gold reserves between the 1980s and June 2021 were just 8 tons. Under the domestic gold purchase program, our gold reserves have increased from 8 to 14 tons as at the end of 2022. That is just 18 months of implementation of this program. And clearly, the resources will continue, the reserves will continue to grow. Ladies and gentlemen, we understand our fiduciary duty as trustees of our natural resources for and on behalf of the people of Ghana. And we remain committed to do right by the Ghanaian people in the discharge of our duties as trustees of these resources. But we shall continue to count on your support in the discharge of this onerous mandate. I'm confident that out of this dialogue we can all renew our commitment to the sustainable management of our natural resources whilst protecting our natural environment for current and future generations. And I have the singular pleasure and honor to declare the 2-day Natural Resources Stakeholder Dialogue under the theme, Harnessing Our Natural Resources for Our Sustainable Collective Good, duly opened. I wish you fruitful discussions and look forward to the outcomes of the stakeholder dialogue. May God bless us all in our homeland, Ghana, and make her great and strong. I thank you for your attention.
For more news, please visit our website, graphic.com.gh, or follow us on Facebook at Daily Graphic and on YouTube and Twitter at GraphicGH.
Subscribe now.